My name is Christina Parker, and I knew my sister's wedding was over for me before she even reached the altar. They put me in the last row against a stone pillar that blocked the aisle. I heard the music, heard people gasp when Lauren appeared, but all I saw were shoulders and a flash of white slipping in and out of view. It did not feel like a mistake. It felt like a message. My family filled the front rows. Phones were up to catch every angle. No one turned to see if I had made it. On paper, I was the bride's sister. In that room, I was an extra chair. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Lauren lit the screen. "Please don't make things weird today. This has to look perfect." She was saying vows and still sending instructions. For a second, I thought about walking out. Instead, I stayed where they had decided I fit and folded the program until the edge dug into my skin. Then, a man in a dark suit slid into the empty chair beside me like he had chosen that spot. He scanned the room, then looked at the pillar blocking us, and at my untouched place card. He leaned in, voice low and steady. "Just follow my lead. Pretend you're my date," he said. "You don't have to sit back here alone." Later, when he stood up to speak and the whole room went silent, my sister finally looked past the front row. She did not like what she saw. If you have ever felt pushed to the edge of your own family, stay with me and subscribe, because one choice with a stranger turned that perfect night into my breaking point. Would you have taken his offer? A few months before the wedding, the first warning did not come from a fight. It came in an envelope. I came home from work, dropped my bag on the kitchen chair, and saw it sitting alone on the table. Thick cream paper, my name in careful script that looked like it belonged to another life. The return address was my mother's house. Not her name, just the street I grew up on. Inside was the kind of card you buy when you want people to notice the weight. Raised letters, metallic edge, names pressed into the surface. Lauren Parker and Eric Walsh, inviting me to watch them promise forever at a resort I had only seen online. A smaller card slid free and caught against my thumb. Bridesmaids and maid of honor, listed in neat lines. I read it slowly, letting each name register. College roommate, colleague, cousin on our mother's side, maid of honor, a woman Lauren had met at a networking event. My name was not there. The sting was not in the surprise. It was in the confirmation. We had been drifting for years. I knew that. But seeing my absence printed into her big day made the distance feel official in a way nothing else had. My phone buzzed. A photo came through from my mother. The same invitation laid out on her kitchen counter beside a glass of white wine. Her message followed. "Isn't it beautiful? This is such a step up for us." Us, not her daughters. The upgraded version she could talk about at parties. I called because ignoring it would have turned into another weapon. She answered quickly, voice bright, like she was already speaking to an audience. "Did you get it?" she asked. "I did," I said. "I saw the bridal party card." Silence settled on the line. "Well, Lauren had limited spots," she said. "She needed people who fit the image. And with your schedule, being in the wedding might have been too much. Your job is demanding, isn't it?" All that typing. I worked full-time as a paralegal, carrying caseloads and deadlines. To her, it was typing. Lauren's desk job at a glossy firm was a career. The difference was not in the work. It was in who was doing it. "I could have made it work," I said. "You always take things so personally," she replied. "You will be there. That is what matters. No one will be asking who stood where once the photos are hung." She meant the photos on her wall. I thought about where, exactly, I would be standing when those were taken. After we hung up, a text from Lauren appeared. No explanation, no apology, just a single line. "Hope you can come. It would mean a lot." A lot to what? I did not ask. To her image. To the story where she could say, if pressed, that her sister had been invited and had attended. I sat at my small kitchen table with the cards spread in front of me. Other memories surfaced. the school concert where my solo was cut so Lauren could have another verse, the graduation party where my mother introduced me as still figuring it out while listing Lauren's internships, the holiday photo where my shoulder made it into the frame, but my name did not make the caption. The invitation did not create anything new. It gathered those moments into one expensive piece of paper and asked me to smile about it. I filled out the response card anyway, checked will attend, wrote in the date, signed my initials on the line at the bottom. Not because I believed showing up would fix anything, but because some stubborn part of me wanted to be on record in their story, even if they tried to hide the page. As I slid the reply into the mailbox in my building's lobby, a thought I barely let myself form brushed the edge of my mind. One day they would have to look at me. I did not know how that would happen yet. I only knew I was done pretending that being invited meant I belonged. Have you ever opened an envelope from your own family and felt less like a person and more like a prop? The wedding day broke with a blue sky that did not match the way my stomach felt. I drove to the resort alone, the invitation propped in the passenger seat like a ticket I could still decide not to use. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, the place was already dressed for photographs. Staff moved chairs and arrangements with the kind of urgency that comes from knowing every minute has been plotted on a timeline. Inside the lobby, a sign with Lauren and Eric's names steered guests toward a private elevator. My room key waited in an envelope at the front desk. The clerk handed it over with a rehearsed smile and mentioned the bridal suite floor as if that was somewhere I would naturally belong. I took the elevator anyway. On the events level, music leaked under one of the doors. Laughter followed in bursts, the kind that comes easily to people who are sure they are welcome. A rolling rack of dresses blocked half the hall. Through the open doorway, I caught a slice of the room. Curling irons, makeup cases, someone zipping a gown. I recognized my sister's voice before I saw her profile in the mirror. I stepped forward, then a woman with a headset and a leather-bound planner moved into the doorway. Her badge read, Sierra Collins, Events. She looked at me for a second, then at the bracelet on her wrist where a narrow strip of paper was tucked under the band. My last name sat there in black ink next to a note. I watched her eyes flicker as she read it. You must be Christina, she said. The bridal party is in the middle of a shot list. The plan is to keep this space clear so they can stay on schedule. Guests are being directed downstairs to the terrace. The word guest landed between us like a small deliberate cut. Behind her, my sister laughed at something someone said about a spray tan disaster. No one turned toward the hall. I stayed where I was long enough for Sierra to add, they have a lot to get through before the ceremony. It will be easier for everyone if we stick to the schedule. There it was, the polite version of, you were not written into this scene. I got it, I said, wouldn't want to slow anything down. Sierra stepped back just far enough to close the door. The music softened as the latch clicked into place. Whatever else she had been told about me, it was enough to make blocking the doorway seem like part of her job. I followed the signs to the ceremony lawn. The resort had built an archway at the front, all flowers and fabric, the kind of structure meant for posed kisses and save-the-date photos. Rows of chairs faced it in clean lines. An easel held the seating chart, printed on the same heavy paper as the invitation. I scanned the list until I found my name near the bottom. The row number sent me all the way back, where a decorative column held up the edge of the arch. The chair with my place card tilted toward that column so that from the seat, the center of the aisle disappeared behind stone. Empty spaces dotted the rows closer to the front. There was room to shift a chair, create a new spot, pretend the layout had been a mistake. No one had bothered. I sat anyway. Leaving would have turned their choice into my disappearance. Staying felt like the only way to refuse that. Early guests drifted in and filled the chairs ahead of me. Ushers walked Lauren's friends to spots with perfect views. My mother arrived on the arm of a relative, wearing a dress she had described to me over the phone in great detail and eyes that slid right over the back row. She smiled for someone's camera, adjusted a strand of hair, and took her place close to the aisle. I watched all of it from the edge, the program in my hand, the stone column cutting the world in two. Somewhere behind the flowers, my sister was getting ready to walk into a scene without me. I told myself I was taking notes now, not just blows. By the time the officiant cleared his throat, the lawn felt full. Music shifted, ushers stopped moving, and silence settled over the rows. From where I sat, I caught only pieces of the ceremony: a slice of white when the aisle opened, the edge of a bouquet, the curve of Lauren's veil when the breeze caught it. The full view belonged to the people up front. I was left with scraps. The words carried clearly enough: promises, permanence, lines about building a life together. Somewhere inside them, Lauren's name paired with Eric's until it sounded like a brand. I tried to picture her expression while she said those lines and could not. Stone at my side turned the moment into something I had to imagine instead of witness. When people laughed at a joke the officiant made, I smiled a beat late, reacting to sound instead of what they saw. It felt like listening to a movie with the screen blocked. I thought about my mother saying no one would remember who sat where, and wondered if she would ever admit that someone had decided I did not need to see anything at all. Movement beside me pulled me out of the loop in my head. A man had taken the empty chair to my right. I had not seen him walk down the aisle. One moment the seat was bare, the next he was there, adjusting his jacket, attention fixed on the couple I could not see. He did not fidget or check his phone. He watched the front with a calm that did not match the placement. We stood when the officiant asked everyone to rise. A narrow gap opened between shoulders, just enough for me to see Lauren's profile turn toward Eric. My chest tightened on reflex. The man beside me did not rise right away. He seemed to be scanning the space, row by row, cataloging who had been given what spot. When his gaze passed over our section, something in his face shifted, as if a detail had just clicked. Then he straightened. Up close, I could see he was older than me, lines at the corners of his eyes deeper when he narrowed them. His suit looked tailored, the watch at his wrist catching light when he raised his hand. The officiant pronounced them married and applause rose. Guests leaned into the aisle, phones raised. I clapped because staying still would have been a statement no one in this family wanted on record. Lauren and Eric walked past. Neither of them glanced toward the back. As the crowd spilled toward the terrace, the man stayed seated. So did I. It was easier to wait than to squeeze into a line of people pretending everything here was fair. "They knew exactly where they put you," he said, voice low enough not to carry. "This place does not make random seating mistakes." I watched him instead of answering. Plenty of people notice small cruelties and choose to look away. The fact that he had said anything at all made him stand out. "You sound certain," I said. "I read rooms for a living," he replied. This one was trying very hard not to look obvious. It was not a throwaway comment. It was a conclusion. Some tight part of me eased, not because the chair had moved, but because someone had named what I had been trying to swallow. Ushers called from the path, nudging people toward cocktails. I stood, flexing my fingers to shake out the tension, and smoothed my dress. He rose too and fell into step beside me as if we had walked out of crowded rooms together before. At the edge of the lawn, I looked back once. From our row, the aisle cut off at an odd angle behind the column. From the front, it probably looked flawless. Same setup, two different stories depending on where you had been told to sit. I did not know yet why he had really come to this wedding or what he planned to do with what he saw. I only knew that for the first time that day, I was not walking into the next room entirely alone. The cocktail hour blurred into a low hum of clinking glasses and polite laughter. Servers floated between clusters of guests with trays held high. I stayed near the edge of the terrace, close enough to look like I was participating. Far enough that no one mistook me for someone they needed to impress. Whenever Jordan drifted off to speak with men in dark suits, I caught small shifts in posture and tone. He was not guessing about this crowd. He knew it. When the staff opened the ballroom doors for dinner, a current pulled everyone inside. Place cards waited at each table, little flags marking where people were expected to belong. I checked mine and found a number that matched a round table pushed against the far wall, so close to the service doors that every course would pass in front of my chair before it reached anyone else. I did not move toward it. Jordan appeared at my side like he had finished testing his theory about the hierarchy of the room. He held his own card between two fingers, read my face, then glanced at the table assignments posted near the entrance. "They put you by the kitchen," he said. "Of course they did." "It is fine," I replied. "I am used to it. That is not a reason to keep accepting it." He walked ahead without waiting for me to argue and picked a table near the front, not at the head but close enough that conversation from that platform would carry clearly. He slipped his card into an empty setting, then took mine and set it beside his. The names originally printed there disappeared into his jacket pocket. A man in his 50s wearing an expensive watch glanced over, his eyes moving between Jordan and the rearranged place cards. His greeting held a question. "I needed to be where I can hear," Jordan said in an even tone. "Eric knows why." The question in the man's face vanished. "Of course," he answered. "Glad you made it. We were not sure you would come in person." "I wanted to see how everything looked from the inside," Jordan replied. No one asked who I was while the first course was served. They spoke about markets, contracts, people whose names meant nothing to me. I focused on my plate and on the way their attention followed Jordan whenever he opened his mouth. Whatever his title was in their world, it carried weight. Halfway through the main course, the band cut off mid-song. The room dimmed slightly, the way venues do when they want eyes on the stage. An MC stepped up to a small microphone stand near the head table and asked for quiet. He introduced my mother first. She delivered the same highlights I had grown up hearing about Lauren, polished now into a speech. After her came one of Eric's colleagues, then a friend from college. Each toast followed the same arc. Praise, nostalgia, a joke to keep everything light. Applause rose and fell in practiced waves. Napkins dabbed at eyes. Glasses clinked. The MC glanced at a card in his hand, then smiled toward our table. "And now," he said, "we are honored to hear from someone whose support has meant a great deal to Eric's career and to the future of his company. Jordan Hayes has been instrumental in backing the projects that brought Eric here. Jordan, would you say a few words?" Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Chairs shifted as people turned. At the head table, Lauren's smile froze just enough for me to notice. Jordan set down his fork, wiped his hands on his napkin, and stood. For a second, he rested a steady hand on the back of my chair, a small anchor, then stepped into the space between tables with the ease of someone walking toward a deal he had already decided how to close. I watched him cross the room, not as a stranger anymore, but as the person everyone else suddenly remembered they should have been watching from the beginning. The microphone looked small in his hand. The MC stepped back, and the room settled into that careful silence people give to money and influence. From my table, I saw faces tilt toward Jordan, expecting something smooth they could nod through. He paused once, then started talking about arrangements. He kept it brief. In his work, he said, he pays attention to how people are placed, who is centered, who is pushed to the edges, who gets a clear view, and who is asked to sit where things are harder to see. He called it a quiet test of character. He never used my name. He did not mention pillars or charts. Instead, he spoke about the relative you assume will not be missed if you move them behind the story you want the room to believe. The word relative landed harder than anything else. No one turned, but I felt attention stretch toward the back row like a wire. He finished with a line about only trusting partnerships that treat people as more than decoration, wished Lauren and Eric well, and handed the microphone back. It took a second for anyone to remember to clap. When they did, the sound came out thin and uneven. Lauren's smile had flattened. My mother's fingers were tight around the stem of her glass. The MC tried to glide into the next moment, but something in the room had shifted and would not slide back. Jordan sat down, lifted his water, and asked quietly if I was all right. I said I was done pretending this was normal. Saying it out loud felt like setting something heavy down. The band started another song. A few couples stood, grateful for an excuse to move. Conversation at our table came back in small, strained bursts. No one mentioned the speech directly. They talked about markets, flights, hotels. The silence between topics said more than their words. Dessert arrived, matched to the colors of the flowers. I left my fork untouched. My mother approached when enough time had passed for her to claim she had been making rounds. She walked slowly, shoulders square. When she reached my chair, she said my name in a tone that made nearby conversations dip. She told me the evening had been planned down to the minute, that a careless comment could hurt Eric's future, that important guests might now have questions about our family. She did not ask where I had been sitting. She did not acknowledge the back row at all. In her mind, the problem was not what had been done, but that someone had noticed. I told her I had taken the seat they assigned me, watched her give a speech that erased me, and listened while the only person who seemed bothered by that was the man she invited here for his money. I said I was tired of acting like that was acceptable. My voice stayed level. I did not raise it or soften it. Jordan did not interrupt or smooth anything over. He just watched her the way he might watch a client talk past the point where a deal can be saved. For a heartbeat, her expression slipped. Then the mask came back. She said we would discuss my attitude later and that tonight was not about me. After that, she turned and walked toward the part of the room that had always counted more. The rest of the night unfolded like a script no one believed in anymore. There was a first dance, more photos, a sparkler line at the door. I stood where I could see without joining in, letting people build the scene they wanted for their albums. When the crowd thinned and the band started packing up, I found Jordan near the exit. I thanked him for using his voice in a room where mine had never carried. He said I was the one who had drawn the real line by refusing to keep playing along. Later, back in the hotel room, the quiet felt different. They had designed a day where I was supposed to fade into the background. For a few minutes, they had been the ones exposed. That did not balance anything. It did, however, mark the place where I stopped letting them decide how visible I was allowed to be. The weeks after the wedding did not explode. They just thinned out. Deadlines at the firm stacked up again. I answered clients, attorneys, even spam, and let messages from my family sit unopened. When I finally read them, the pattern was clear. My mother wrote about guests, impressions, and how one awkward moment might hurt Eric's future. She said I had overreacted, that I should apologize so people would not get the wrong idea about us. She never asked how I felt. I drafted replies and erased them. In the end, I sent one short email. I wrote that I would not apologize for the chair they chose for me, that I would not pretend being pushed aside was love, and that if she wanted any relationship with me, it would have to start with truth. Then I muted the thread and let the silence sit. News from that night traveled without my help. I heard secondhand that Eric kept his job, but missed out on a promotion everyone had treated as guaranteed. His company's board wanted to know why someone like Jordan Hayes had stepped back from a project he was expected to support. No one could quote a direct threat in that speech, but people whose lives depend on reputation know how to read quiet warnings. For Lauren, the fallout landed in smaller, sharper ways. A committee she wanted suddenly put her on hold. A couple she bragged about double dating with stopped returning messages. Posts about the wedding slowed. When photos did appear, the comments were lighter. No one confronted her. They just shifted a little farther away. My mother's circle changed too. Women who used to praise her for raising such a star now changed the subject when she brought up the wedding. For someone who lived to be admired, Being quietly judged was its own sentence. None of that fixed anything between us. It did, however, make one choice easier. I gathered the invitations, the programs, the old photos where I barely made the edge of the frame, and I stopped waiting for my family to wake up different. I changed my number and sent one last message from an address I could ignore. I said I would not be coming to holidays or birthdays, that any necessary information could go through email, and that I was done playing the quiet extra. I did not argue my case. I simply stepped out of theirs. Life stayed ordinary. I still rode the bus, packed leftovers for lunch, worked late when a filing deadline demanded it. The difference was inside my apartment. Without the constant rehearsal of what I might say to win them over, the silence felt less like punishment and more like space. Jordan and I kept seeing each other, but not as a strategy. We met for coffee, walked through streets neither of us had a history in, and talked about books, food, office stories. Whatever he had done with that microphone, he left there. With me, he behaved like a person who had seen a line crossed and refused to be part of it. Over time, the raw edge of what I did not have with my mother and sister dulled. I grieved the family I had wanted and accepted the one I actually got. I did not forgive them, but I stopped letting them write new chapters in a story where I always came last. The last update I heard about Lauren came through a cousin. The marriage, she said, was not matching the fairy tale Lauren had planned out loud. There were arguments about money, about image, about how much of their life should be staged for other people. I listened, wished them well in my head, and changed the subject. Their house was no longer one I had to walk into. If you were in my place, would you cut contact and protect your peace? Or keep showing up hoping people like that might change? Do you see walking away from family as selfish, or as sometimes the only sane boundary left? Tell me what you would have done, and thank you for staying with me until the end of this story.